All right, let's begin in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Lord God, we ask your blessing upon this time, that you would send your Holy Spirit into our hearts, open them to your love and your truth. Pray that you would give us your wisdom. And we pray especially through the intercession of our Blessed Mother, Hail Mary,
full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Our Lady, seat of wisdom.
Pray for us.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Father Raphael Mary, as you probably know, because you probably saw a flyer or you got some email propaganda, and that's why you're here. So I teach philosophy up at St. Albert's Priory in Oakland at the Dominican School of Philosophy and Theology in Berkeley, which is where our young brothers studying for the priesthood, do their philosophical and theological studies. So I am a philosopher, and this is going to be a philosophy talk. So if any of you happen to not be a Catholic or not be a Christian, I would hope that you would feel right at home. Because our faith teaches us that we can use reason to reach a lot of conclusions about the world. And I think it's particularly useful here. And one of the reasons I wanted to give this talk is because I don't hear the questions of AI talked about from a philosophical point of view very often, at least in Catholic circles. And I think it should be, because there are philosophical tools that we can use to think about what is AI and how should we, and from that, think about how should we respond to it. In this talk, I'm not going to get into the response part. We are going to focus on just the question of what is intelligence and can a computer have it. And I'm actually going to address these questions in reverse order. So you might think that you want to figure out what intelligence is first, and then ask if a computer can have it. I think actually asking whether a computer can have what we have. Right? So without defining it per se, but just saying, look, you know what it is to be intelligent because you are intelligent. Right? Start there and see whether it makes sense to think of a computer having it. And then in the second part of the talk, we'll get to more what intelligence really is, what defines it, what's essential to it. Okay? So I want to begin. We often hear Catholics make vague but strangely confident assertions like, AI is not really intelligent. AI will never have real intelligence. Okay, you hear people say these things, but I very rarely hear anybody give an argument for them, or at least not a very clear argument that I can discern. And you might be worried that saying these things, you might want these to be true, but saying them also puts you in danger of sort of boldly denying that science can go to a particular place. So one might worry that the claims are overly bold in the sense that they say, well, we know science isn't going to go there, right? We know that technology isn't going to advance in such a direction such that computers could be intelligent. Okay, so I worry about that a little bit because a lot of times these phrases, I think they're motivated by thinking that, well, this must be true because our faith requires it. Whether or not our faith requires it, I'm going to set aside for now. And just ask, can these claims be defended with an argument? So this is a quote from Pope Leo's recent encyclical, in which he worries about the same sort of thing here. He says, it is appropriate to preface this discussion on AI with two considerations. First, any statement regarding AI risks becoming quickly outdated, given the remarkable pace at which these systems are developing. Second, all of us, including those who design them, possess only a limited understanding of their actual functioning. So I want to acknowledge this right off the bat, because I'm actually going to defend these two claims. And I think that if we're going to believe them, we ought to be able to defend them. Okay, so the goal of the first part of this talk is to give a decisive argument that these claims are true. I will argue that no computer is or ever will be intelligent. And I do this with full awareness that I can't predict the future of technology. So I want to put in a little disclaimer here. To be more precise, I will argue that no computer could ever be intelligent in virtue of executing a particular kind of software. This does not necessarily exclude the possibility of future hardware technologies being intelligent. But such future technologies would have to be radically different from what we now call computers. So I'll return to that issue in part 2 of the talk. So this first part of the talk is really just about computers. Now, you might say, well, okay, that's the only thing people think could be intelligent other than us, right? True, perhaps, at this moment in history. That's what people are focused on. Okay. About halfway through the talk, I'm going to stop for questions so we can actually kind of have a little conversation before I go on to the second part, because the second part will be a little different. Okay, so here's the argument that I want to base, kind of the centerpiece of this talk. And maybe some of you have seen this argument before. It comes from the philosopher John R. Searle. He actually first published the argument in 1980 and has defended it until his death just last year. So this is a thought experiment. Now what a thought experiment is it's an experiment we conduct just in our imagination. Now there's certain things that are dangerous about conducting experiments in your imagination, right? You don't have nature to play out the result of the experiment, you just have your own mind. And so a thought experiment has to be designed in such a way that it's pointing out some conceptual difficulty, some fact that we can see just by thinking about it without actually doing the experiment in real life. Okay, with that preface, John Searle said, suppose that there was this room, and I'm inside of it. He put himself inside of it. This is him here. And inside the room, you have a big box full of Chinese characters. And you have a book, a really big book, that has strings of Chinese characters. The book has instructions in English in it, but it doesn't tell you anything about the characters. It just says, these characters, input these characters, and you output these characters. Outside of the room, you have native Chinese speakers putting in a string of characters, Chinese characters. John Searle inside the room receives them. He looks them up in his book, and he puts together the response according to what the book tells him to do. Now, this book can be extremely complex, and it would have to be if this was going to really work in real life. And he can do this for as long a period of time as we can imagine. And ultimately, his idea is he could convince the people outside the room that he is a native Chinese speaker. But as Searle himself was wont to say, but I don't know a damn word of Chinese. Right? All the way through this entire process, he doesn't learn a word of Chinese. Now the point of this thought experiment is that what he is doing inside the Chinese room, in taking these characters in, looking up the response in the book, and putting characters out the other side, what he is doing is essentially no different than what a computer does. Now, when I say what a computer does, I'm not thinking of any particular software. I'm not thinking of large language models, which is the popular mode of AI at this time, may not be in the future. I'm not thinking of any specific kind of software. Every kind of software operates this way because this is the way a computer operates. It takes in inputs and it puts out outputs. So the claim is, his claim, is that if he can't know Chinese inside the Chinese room, then neither can a computer. And if whatever goes for Chinese goes for any sort of cognitive ability, notice that the people outside the room are going to think that he knows Chinese, because if he's good enough at what he's doing, right? Probably have to be super fast, faster than humans really could be, which computers happen to be, right? But if he's good enough at it, the people outside the room will be convinced, because the behavior of the room, as it were, will be that of a Chinese speaker. So the outward behavior matches what a human mind that knows Chinese could do. But Searle's claim is there's no knowledge and no understanding in there. Okay, I want to show you this little video from the BBC. So that's the argument. And so the argument is that this is what's happening with any computer program. Now, so just to review, so the input are sentences written in Chinese characters. The book itself contains instructions on how to respond to a whole range of Chinese character combinations. It also gives instructions on how to alter and even rewrite its contents. Now, at the time Jean Searle wrote this, or came up with this experiment, that last part wasn't there. Because we didn't have the kind of AI that we have now that actually rewrites itself, that actually learns in the sense of not just adding data to a database, but rewriting the rules by which it makes responses. But you could have a book that did that, right? Now, of course, no human being could do this fast enough to make it possible. But that's not a limit for machines, right? And if a human being could do it fast enough, they could execute the same sort of processing, which is that the person in the Chinese room looks up in the book how to respond to the questions, maybe how to modify the book, and puts out a response expressed in Chinese characters. Okay, note that the person in the Chinese room cannot learn Chinese from inside the room. Do you see why? Right, so the person doesn't have access to the meanings of the symbols that he manipulates. The instructions in the book are in English, so he can figure out what to do with the book. But nothing tells him what any of the symbols mean. Of course, in the video he said, well, some of the symbols in the question are appearing in the answer, right? But if you don't know what the question is, and you don't know what the answer is, it doesn't really get you anywhere. One way to think about this is, like, is it possible to learn Russian using a Russian dictionary? Right? No, because you don't have any place to start. You don't have any way. You know that these are symbols on a page, language, but you don't know what they symbolize. You don't know the meaning behind those symbols. Okay, so the central problem, as John Searle puts it, is that the person in the Chinese room has syntax, but not semantics. Okay, where syntax is a system of rules for arranging symbols. Okay, for example, a sentence is a string of alphabetic characters beginning with a capital letter and ending either with a period, exclamation point, or question mark. Right, that's a rule for making a sentence. Notice that there's nothing about what the meaning of the sentence is in that rule. Semantics are a system of symbols with meanings attached to them. Okay, so for example, the word dog is a string of symbols that by human convention signifies a particular kind of animal, dog. Okay, so it's that the man in the Chinese room lacks. The person in the Chinese room certainly behaves as though he knows Chinese, as viewed from the outside. It seems like he knows Chinese. The behavior is the same. If he gets good enough at it, it's going to be the same as a Chinese speaker. It could at least convince the people on the outside that there's a native Chinese speaker in there. But he does not know the meanings of the characters. So, the Chinese room argument can go something like this. First premise, intelligence requires semantic content. It requires meaning. Premise 2, computers have syntax only. Okay, they only have symbols manipulated by rules. Premise 3, syntax by itself cannot yield semantic content. No matter how many symbols you put together and how many rules you have, and how complex they are, you still don't get the meaning. Therefore, no computer could be intelligent. So that's the basic argument. And I would like to pause for questions or comments, because I think that Yeah, go ahead.
I think intelligence is a misnomer.
Speak up, I'm sorry.
Are you familiar with Roger Penrose's work? He actually distinguishes between intelligence and consciousness. So a computer or a machine can be intelligent, but it doesn't have a soul or consciousness. So, well, anyway.
Yeah, so consciousness is a separate thing. It's not so much what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, but I think a computer, a machine can have intelligence.
Okay, so then how would you respond to the question of the fact that it has only syntax, that it's only manipulating?
It's still part of the program.
It is, right, it's part of the
It
program.
is part of the program.
So that's part of the question, is whether programmers.
It's programming
Yeah.
that can have some intelligence and decision point if this, do that, if that, or do that. And the question is, a machine can play chess to beat human.
That's right.
But the question is, can the machine know it's playing chess?
Yeah, that's a good question. But the real question here is,
So a machine,
would it have to know that it's playing chess in order to be intelligent?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. Well, I don't know. I think a machine can be intelligent enough to beat human in like chess, but does it know how it's actually playing?
Right. So here's a way we talk about intelligence in two different ways.
Yes.
In one way, we talk about it in terms of what it can do, right? In another way, we talk about it in terms of what it is and what's going on, what's causing the thing it's doing. The interesting thing about the Chinese room is that what it can do externally is speak in Chinese. The room, with John in there and the book and the symbols, that system together, it speaks Chinese in a certain sense, right? Because to the speakers on the outside who don't know what's going on inside the box, right? It seems to be doing the same thing that a Chinese speaker would do.
Well, anyway.
But the question is, do we consider that to be intelligence? Yeah.
So I would call history, for example, for Egyptian hieroglyphs. So there was a scientist named Champollion. He traveled to Egypt with Napoleon Bonaparte, and then he was exposed to the hieroglyphs. He didn't know a thing about them.
Yeah.
So then, for him, it was just signs. But just looking at patterns, he started to say, okay, I can find the structure. I can see that this sign resembles something, so I can guess that it might mean something. So he was able to get meaning of it, even though, as in this example, he didn't know a thing about initially whether there was meaning. So is there a way, if you compute a lot of all these sentences, you can get to some understanding of what they are, even though at the beginning we don't know a thing about them?
I think, so the hieroglyphics example is very interesting because it seems parallel to the Chinese room.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is that with the hieroglyphics, probably the way that almost certainly the way that he figured out what they mean is by a few things. Context, exactly. So he saw them in the context of a burial rite, right? And he saw the same thing in the context of a different burial rite, and he compared those to each other. Also, Egyptian hieroglyphics have, they're pictorial, and so they have a certain representative aspect to them, right? So the difficulty is in the Chinese room, you don't have any of that context at all. It's partially it's designed that way to remove the context. So I'm not sure that the same thing could happen. There was a question back here?
Yeah. Well, the context. I'm the technology teacher. So.
Oh, okay.
And so one of the things I'm trying with students is, the thing that's going around, like, ask how many R's are in strawberry, and it comes back with like that there's 7, and it's the second 9th letter, or something, so it's like, it doesn't, it was kind of, my dad was in saying garbage in, garbage out, so it's like, whatever is being learned from, where it's getting its learning from. So it's not, it's just, it's a collection of information that can be, analyzed and synthesized quicker than we can. So it's, it's a thing, it's a tool.
So that's right. I think that's the way we should look at it. However, I do want to emphasize that whether or not AI makes mistakes is not part of this argument. I expect that it's going to make fewer and fewer mistakes as technology advances. I think that's virtually certain. So it's really that latter point that you make. That this is it's just a manipulation of symbols in and out. Is there a question here?
Is a robot analogous to a computer?
So a robot is usually like it's got a computer in it, right?
So
It's something that moves around that has a computer in it.
So a robot can adapt its behavior according to the experiences it has?
Well, whether or not a robot has experiences is not really what this talk is about. The question is really whether it has intelligence, like we have. If the Chinese room is correct, it doesn't actually understand anything. It has behavior. It behaves as though, just like the Chinese room does, it behaves as though it understood.
Yeah.
But it only has syntax, it only has symbols without meaning attached to them. So the question of experience is more of a question of consciousness, which is also an interesting question, but I want to keep it focused on just intelligence for now because it could get, really big. There's a question back here. Teal
So if you were to take a beginning French class, one of the first things you would learn to say is ça va. And that can mean many things. It can mean hello, it can mean how are you, it can mean fine, it can mean a whole range of things. And yet, therefore, you would learn this as a beginner without having any idea what it literally meant. You would just know it's the sort of thing that I say in situations in which you're greeting people. We said back and forth, we said it's a question.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, humans are able to use things and say things without having any idea what it exactly means. I mean, you wouldn't say that was non-human. So, and we gained that knowledge simply by means of looking how those two syllables were used in context. Now, a computer or LLM just does this on a huge scale because it's not just seeing a small set of interactions between people, but it's got all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
How is that fundamentally any different than my savant illustration?
Well, there may be a similarity with savant, because you're right. So, some words in different languages don't have, like, there's a lot of words that if someone asks you, what does that mean? You'd be like, well, I don't know, like
it goes.
obviously
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean? Well, I mean, it doesn't really mean anything. You use it in a particular way, right? But language in itself is not that way. Because, of course, the and ça va function in the context of sentences that have meaning, that we know. Now, well, so the question is, do we actually know the meanings of our sentences? So we're going to get to that a little bit later. Or are we just like computers? Because that's one response.
Because that's the thing, because if we don't actually need to have deep meaning, then we shouldn't impose that on computers.
Well, but it's important. It's important that when we're talking about intelligence, no, I agree. If we have no meaning, then it's unfair to expect computers to have it,
Yes.
right? We'll get to that question.
Okay.
I do want to say that the logical form of the objection is not valid to disprove this argument, and the reason is because the fact that some language has no meaning, it doesn't follow that language has no meaning.
Yeah, but I'm just
Right.
trying to...
And this is an argument that it can have no meaning, right? So the question is can you have intelligence with no meaning at all? The question is not whether an intelligent person can, make sounds that don't have a clear meaning or for which they don't know the meaning.
Yeah, well, I'm
Right.
actually arguing against premise 3.
Okay.
So syntax...
Syntax by itself cannot yield semantic content.
So
Well, you seem to argue in favor of it, though,
Well,
actually.
I'm saying that that's setting up a dichotomy. There's syntax and semantics, but maybe it's more subtle than that. Maybe there's syntax and there's how to use certain words in a certain context, and you really know what the heck you're saying.
Yeah, there can be something in between for humans.
And so therefore, I'm actually arguing against premise 3 there, that dichotomy that you're setting up between syntax and semantics may not be fully what the real system is like.
Yeah, so even if we concede that there is no semantics in the use of sabah, let's say,
Yeah.
for some people, even if we concede that, it doesn't follow from that you get semantics from syntax. In fact, you're conceding that you're not getting
but
semantics.
then
Right?
it also gets premise 2 that
It's really premise 1 you're denying.
Well, no, it's because if I got the meaning of sabah by just looking at contextual clues. And computers can look at large sets of language, which is just a set of contextual clues. Then, in some sense, premise 2, computers have syntax only, may not be true, because if that would mean that I'm only using syntax only when I'm saying sabah.
If premise 2 is not true, then it must be the case that you can get to the meaning of the Chinese characters from inside the Chinese room.
No, I'm saying that in the case of sabah, I don't have meaning, nor do I have just syntax. I have this intermediate thing.
So I'm not talking about Savant, I'm talking about the computer, because that's what we're talking about here, right? So,
I'm making an analogy that if I tried to use this argument to prove that humans can be intelligent, intelligence requires semantic content, humans have syntax only, syntax therefore cannot yield content, therefore no human can be intelligent, you would say that's a false premise because of premise 2. Humans can't have more than syntax. And I'm saying that computers can have more than syntax too.
But you haven't given an argument for the computers can have more than syntax. You gave an argument about Savant, which is about
but I'm saying, but I'm making an analogy between these Savant and the use of you can use a word without knowing what it means.
So the important thing about the Chinese room argument is it's intended to cut off those analogies. To explain why there's not an analogy actually there. Because what the computer is doing is just what John Searle is doing in the Chinese room. Right? There is no analogy between the two because the system is incapable of getting at meaning. Right? That's the way the thought experiment is set up. And the claim is that that's just what a computer does in large language models too, just as much as anything else. Because the only thing even close to intelligence in the Chinese room is Searle, right? He's intelligent, but he can't use his intelligence because of the way the system's set up.
But the argument is working only because because you're assuming that it's a black box, but you can't see inside the little human looking in.
Let's move on, and maybe we can talk afterwards.
Okay.
There's a question back here,
Yeah, kind of add on to that. I think, like you laid it out, that a computer can be intelligent because it doesn't know the meaning of characters. So that made me think, like, what does it know? What does it mean to know the meaning of a character?
Yeah.
So, like,
it's a good question.
as a baby grows up, how do they know what a word means? And that's, like, kind of how someone reacts when you say something.
Yeah.
How someone else refers to something. So if a computer can have a memory of like, okay, if I output this and the human said this, now I kind of know that in the sense, the same way that a baby would kind of learn language as they grow. So just thinking of that, like, what does it mean to know the meaning of characters?
So hold that thought. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the second part of the talk because it does make us question, well, what do we even mean when we say we understand?
Yeah. It's just like how you react to things like this.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be the question, right? Is it just the way we react? Is it just inputs and outputs? Because if it is, then we're doing exactly what the Chinese room is doing. If all it is inputs come in and we know how to respond to those inputs, it's just stimulus and response, then in fact, our intelligence reduces to something like what's going on in the Chinese room. There's inputs, and he's giving precise outputs in response to it. So that's something to think about. Was there a question over here? Okay, let's just take a few more here. Yeah.
We talk about semantics and meaning. I take that to mean relationships. That large language models are very good at creating relationships. They can draw on
creating relationships.
Yeah, they can draw on almost any kind of data on the internet, right? And create new information, even art, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In this sense, are you saying that meaning, from the computer sense, is the creation of these relationships, and that we take that to mean machine intelligence, machine meaning?
So I haven't given you a definition of meaning, right? And that's what we're going to talk about here in the second part. And so I've left it intuitive. But you're right that large language models create, they bring about sentences of words that create new ideas. Ideas that the people who programmed them didn't have, ideas that the people who were putting the inputs in didn't have. That's very clear. However, there's a certain way in which a calculator does that too. If you add two giant numbers in a calculator, that you wouldn't be able to add quickly in your head. A new number is going to come out that you hadn't thought of, and that the calculator just gave you. So is a calculator a form of intelligence then? We don't usually think so, because the calculator is just rearranging the symbols. It's just doing what theoretically we could have done given a lot of time.
I think I prefer Roger Penrose's explanation than this.
I don't think Roger Penrose is talking about the same thing.
It's not the same thing.
Yeah, it's not the same thing.
It's kind of similar. Is if A doesn't contain B, then if you hire more A, how can you expect B to emerge from
That's
A?
right. That's right.
You hire more and more codes and more data, but there's no, so how can you expect B? You just
That's the idea. That's the idea here. Is that the Chinese room is a simple example. Large language models are insanely complex.
Yeah,
but what is going on in them is just more of the Chinese room, just a whole lot of it in very complex arrangements.
Is that also true? Because basically, the thing about software where it's deterministic, right? In the example of Chinese room, it takes this set of characters and generate that. But in AI, it's not deterministic. You can ask the same question twice and have different answers, right? So a bit like the brain, if you were asking the same question, you may answer based on the context. So it's getting closer because it's using some kind of
well, I mean, indeterminism isn't the same thing as intelligence, right? And you certainly could have a book that gives multiple possible answers, and one just gets chosen.
You just worried me a little bit when you said that these models are capable of generating ideas.
Well, I originally said strings of characters that we understand as ideas. Yeah,
right. But I think it's precisely the human reader of that new content can turn it into an idea, because to me an idea intrinsically has meaning.
Right.
And so I don't think the computer is generating the idea. They're generating a new pattern that wasn't predicted by the person who wrote the code, but then the interpretation of that pattern lies with the human agent.
So it generates symbols that represent an idea in human language. Humans are able to interpret those symbols as an idea, and the ideas can be amazing. Right? They can,
but it's in the interpretation that the idea arises.
Right. Okay, let's move on. We'll have more Q&A at the end. Really good question. And this is a hard thing. So I want to give you a couple of objections to the Chinese room argument that I was wondering if they might come up in the Q&A. I'm just going to give you two objections. So the first objection is the person in the Chinese room is not analogous to a computer running AI software. Rather, the whole system, room, person, book, and basket of symbols, is so analogous. So in other words, remember, John Searle says, I don't know a word of Chinese, therefore neither does a computer. This person says, no, doesn't matter that you don't know a word of Chinese. It's the system that knows. It's not, just like in your brain, it's not one neuron that thinks. Right? It's the whole system that's acting together. And so the response is then, the room knows Chinese. Okay, now when you say it that way, it sounds kind of, well, do we really want to say that?
Somebody who compiled the book knows Chinese.
That's true. The person who compiled the book clearly knows Chinese. But they're not in the system. Like they're somewhere else. They could be outside talking to it and knowing what it's doing. So, John Searle's response to this question is, well, look, I can just memorize the contents of the book, right? And then that's in me, and you still have the same problem that I don't know a single word of Chinese. I just know how to respond to inputs and outputs. So the second objection, I think, is more thought-provoking, and in a way, more radical. So the second objection is this: semantic content is only an illusion. It is not scientifically respectable to believe that our minds have some sort of meaning in them beyond their raw computational power, the power to deal with inputs and outputs. After all, our brains are made entirely of physical stuff, And physical stuff doesn't have meaning. It just is. Thus, our brains are no different from computers. All they can do is manipulate symbols. Hence, premise 1 of the Chinese room argument is false, that intelligence requires semantic content. If you assume we're intelligent, according to this, we don't actually have meaning in our minds. All we're really doing is something like in the example of Sava, something like in the way, maybe the way a baby first learns its first words, right? It uses it by seeing the way that it's used and learning what output to give in response to an input. So the idea of this objection is that's all our minds do, too.
Yes, but that's not reason.
Well, I would say that as well, but there are a lot of philosophers who argue that this is the case. Well, that something like this is like the case. So I think we have to at least think about this response to the argument. So it's challenging because it requires us to ask the question, what is intelligence? So is intelligence, and this is sort of the question you were getting at with chess, right? Is intelligence just the ability to carry out an operation? In the case of large language models, they carry out operations that no human could carry out, or if they did, it would take forever. You know, generate a possible chemical composition for a medication that does this, right? It maybe generates 10 of them. We test them in the lab, and one of them turns out to be correct. It would have taken us 50 years, maybe, to discover something like that. And it did it in a matter of minutes. So, is it just the output that defines what intelligence is? Or is it something else?
Well,
Okay, so this is part 2 of the talk. We'll save questions until the end. There's not that much left here. Okay, so recall that I started with a kind of intuitive definition of intelligence. Intelligence is just what we have. Right? But see, this objection is problematizing that. It's calling into question, what do we really have? And this is kind of what you were saying in the back. Like, what is it to understand? What is it to have meaning? Okay, so what is it that we have? So one feature of our intelligence seems to be that our thoughts have meaning. Our thoughts signify things. Now, I don't know, to some extent it's difficult to give an argument for this, because it's like the first thing that we know is that we can think. Right? There are things, we have like, I can think about the dinner roll I had tonight over at the Dominican house. And I can think about dinner rolls in general. And if you ask me, well, wait, how do you know that your thoughts are about dinner rolls? How do you know your thoughts aren't about tigers or running? I don't have a particular answer for you. I just because that's what I'm thinking about. Right? Like I don't have, there doesn't seem to be space in my mind to doubt whether my thought is about a dinner roll. You know, it doesn't seem like for example, I can doubt whether this podium is here. Like maybe I'm hallucinating. Maybe all my senses are tricking me, right? And this podium actually isn't here. I don't believe that the podium's not here, but I can understand what it would be to be mistaken about the podium being here. It's hard for me to even see what it would mean for me to be mistaken about knowing that my thought is about a dinner roll. You sort of see what I'm saying? There's no space between me and the thought in a certain way in order to fit in doubt.
An identification.
So this seems to be a distinctive part of intelligence, something that intelligence has. But, and here's the question: could it be only an illusion? So could all of our language be something like the Sava example, where all we've really learned is, in this situation, I use this word, and in this situation, and I use it this particular way. I have a set of inputs and outputs that I consult. Could that be the case for all of the meaning in our mind?
I don't think so.
Well, I don't either, sister. I really don't.
Well, because many people agree on it. Then.
So I want to claim, and again, it's very hard to come up with an argument for this, because when someone supposes that maybe your thoughts don't have meaning, I don't know what they mean. kind of like in a certain way, I can't quite go there with my mind. So I don't think that we can consistently doubt that our thoughts have meaning. We know immediately that they have meaning, and we know immediately what they mean as well. If that's right, then we can now name at least one necessary feature of intelligence. All intelligent systems have intrinsic meaning. Okay, now this word intrinsic is really important here, because this is what it separates us from the Chinese room. Okay, what precisely does intrinsic mean here? Intrinsic means from within, or from its own nature. It contrasts with extrinsic, which is the way that symbols have meaning. Like symbols do have meaning, but it's extrinsic. It's imposed upon them from the outside. Right? So this word intelligence has meaning because these particular squiggles, right, has meaning because humans have agreed to a particular meaning associated with that combination of symbols. In other words, the meaning has been put on it. It's not that like this combination of squiggles and lines has of its very nature some meaning. Right? We have given it that. That's what it is to be a symbol. And so my claim here is that if our minds have meaning, if our thoughts have meaning, there needs to be somewhere in us intrinsic meaning. In other words, meaning that's not merely symbols. One way to think of it is it can't be symbols all the way down. Because a symbol's meaning has to come from somewhere. And if the symbol of, like a seed has meaning from another symbol, and that one has a meaning from another symbol, eventually you have to bottom out in something that has meaning, not from something else, but in itself. Okay, so for example, suppose I tell you that that little star means squirrel, and little squiggly means nuts. Okay, you now have what you know what I mean when I write that. Right? You can read that because I told you what the symbols mean. But the star and the squiggly don't mean anything intrinsically. Like in themselves, they don't have meaning. They have extrinsic meaning because I said, let the star mean squirrel and let the squiggly mean nuts. I've declared it, I sort of made myself God in a way over them, right? I've said these will mean this. And now, given that you're listening to me, you know that you can read the sentence with those symbols in it. But they don't have intrinsic meanings. They're symbols, so their meaning is extrinsic, imposed upon them from the outside. In this case, imposed by me. So, and the meaning of all symbols is extrinsic. It's parasitic on something outside of themselves. They have no intrinsic meaning. They get their meaning from something else. Thus, if my thoughts have meaning, and I would say with Sister that they must, because I can't see my way to denying that my thoughts have meaning. Even if I did, like, the word deny has meaning, right? I would be contradicting myself even in trying to state that. So it seems like my thoughts must have meaning. If they do, they cannot be purely symbolic or extrinsic meaning. It can't be just that. Sometimes maybe, we have some idea that we don't really know what it means. Somebody taught us a word, right? And we know how to use the word in certain circumstances, but we don't really know what it means. That can happen. But that can be all that there is to our minds. If it were, then their meaning would have to come from someplace else. And where would that someplace else be? Of course, unless we go back to the place of saying that our minds have no meaning. So it seems then that our thoughts must have intrinsic meaning. Something intrinsic to them. Something that has meaning in itself. In us. And that's a little bit creepy, right? Because all the things that have meaning in the world, everything that comes out of like a chatbot, right? It's going to be strings of characters, right? They're symbols. They don't, they're just like the star and the squiggle, they don't have meaning in themselves. They have meaning because humans have imposed a particular meaning upon them. So what is this? So we can now formulate an argument, and this is the provocative part of the talk. I think this is the more controversial part, that no purely physical system could be intelligent. Okay? This is all me. This is not John Searle. Note that this is a stronger claim. John Searle, by the way, would reject this the argument I'm about to make, because John Searle was a materialist. Note that this is a stronger claim than the claim that no computer can be intelligent. Okay, this is a claim that no physical system could be intelligent. Okay, so here's the argument. First premise: to be intelligent, a system must contain intrinsic meaning. Okay, it can't have merely symbolic, only symbolic meaning. 2, no purely physical system contains intrinsic meaning. This is the controversial premise. Right? That's the controversial premise. And the conclusion is that no purely physical system can be intelligent. And so you might ask, well, why should we believe that second premise? Right? Premise 1, I claim, must be true unless our most basic experience of our own intelligence is somehow mistaken. Unless I'm somehow mistaken that my thought about dinner rolls is about dinner rolls, or about anything. And it seems very like I said, I can doubt the existence of the podium. Seems kind of crazy, but I can understand how I could be mistaken. I can't understand how I could be mistaken about the meaning of my thought podium. Okay, so premise 1 seems like it must be true, but why think that premise 2 is true? And I think that I want to leave this for the Q&A, but I'll say just a couple of things here. Does anything physical have meaning? That's my question. Do carbon atoms have meaning? Do rocks have meaning? Can anything made purely of physical stuff have intrinsic meaning? It's hard to get one's mind around something physical having any meaning at all. Like what do we even mean by that? But intrinsic meaning, I mean, it can have symbolic meaning, right? I can say this rock symbolizes, the hardness and suffering of my youth, right? I can say that, and then I can communicate. I can say something artistic about the rock, and people will understand what I'm saying. But the rock doesn't mean that in itself. And so it is I claim, for every physical system. It doesn't have meaning built into it. If it has meaning at all, it's symbolic, imposed from the outside. Again, just like the strings of characters that come out of a chat log. They have meaning because humans understand them.
So you're saying humans aren't purely physical?
They don't. Well, that would be a conclusion you'd have to draw from this, if this were right. Yeah. But
so how can you prove that?
yeah. Well, so let's get to the Q&A. So this is the way I'm trying to prove it. I don't call it a proof because I think this second premise needs more defense than I have time to give here, right? But I'm trying to give you an intuitive insight into something physical having intrinsic meaning. It's really spooky. Like physical things have physical properties. Right? Meaning doesn't seem to be a physical property. At least it's not a property we can measure, right, in a lab. And so, if physical things could have meaning, intrinsic meaning to them, it would have to be something that we can't detect. And I'm not sure what that would be, right? Which makes me think they probably can't. Okay, let's move to the Q&A. Yes.
Me?
Yeah.
I was thinking of intrinsic meaning in terms of something like the cross.
Like the cross.
So as Catholics, but other religious communities have, so we discussed in the liturgy, the fruit of our work, so there is something that has been given meaning in that context. So is that something that requires some outside intervention to give that artifact meaning?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I have to distinguish between what I mean by meaning. A lot of times when we say, life has no meaning, right? If I say something like that, what I mean is that I can't find a reason for existing. Like, I can't find a reason for life, something to motivate life. And we say the cross has meaning because it tells us of Christ's love for us. It tells us that life is important and that God wills us to have life. It tells us all sorts of things like that. And so we say that it has meaning. The kind of meaning I'm talking about here is kind of much more basic than that.
I figured that, but just.
Yeah, it's really just, does it signify something? So the word intelligence signifies something, so we would say it has meaning. But then we ask, well, what kind of meaning does it have? Is it intrinsic? So in other words, do these markings mean something in and of themselves, independent of us? Or do they mean something because we have created a language, or somehow humanity has come to a language, and it's because we understand them to have meaning, that they have meaning. If it were in Chinese, I wouldn't know that it has meaning because I know it's Chinese, or it looks like Chinese. I probably couldn't even recognize whether it was Chinese or not. But I wouldn't know what that meaning is. Right? So language is a case where the meaning is imposed from the outside. And when I say meaning, I just mean it signifies something, as opposed to, this watch doesn't signify anything, just as a watch. It's just a physical object. I can use it as part of a language or as part of a signaling system or something, but in itself, it doesn't signify anything. The podium doesn't signify anything. The cross also wouldn't signify anything without the context of the life of Christ. Right? Just merely two things put together in a vertical X, right, would not signify anything by itself without the context of the coming of Christ. Yeah?
Could intrinsic meaning kind of be synonym to it to be like a new thought?
What do you mean by new? What do you mean by a new thought?
Like a thought, like something that's. So I'm trying to like wrap my mind around, what it is to be intelligent. Right? So
yeah.
If it has intrinsic meaning, that the kind of dinner roll thing that came into your mind, that you created this dinner roll in your mind, you put words to it to convey to us. You saw the picture in your head. It came somehow to you. So you kind of created this vision of this.
Yeah, in a certain way. I recalled the dinner roll I saw.
Right.
And then I thought about dinner rolls in general.
Right. You're not looking at it now. It was maybe
I'm not looking at it now.
Some experience or some input. But at this moment, you created dinner roll.
Yeah.
Is that intrinsic meaning?
Well, so the question, what I'm saying is that it seems like my thought about the dinner roll has intrinsic meaning. Because it doesn't see, whereas with intelligence, we could say, well, what if we pretended this meant chicken? Right? Okay, ha ha ha. It doesn't mean chicken, but we could understand what it is for it to mean chicken. Right? I mean, it's conceivable that we could change the meaning of that word to chicken and then all talk using the word intelligence in place of chicken, right? But what I can't do is take my thought about the dinner roll and say, well, what if this thought about the dinner roll is actually about chickens? Well, it doesn't seem like there's a symbol there for me to take and assign to some other meaning. That's one of the challenges of making the analogy between thought and language.
Isn't dinner roll just a concept that you learned in your childhood? Isn't it?
Certainly, yeah.
I mean, so it's a learned reality. I mean, I know what a dinner roll is because I've been served. You look at me and see, I've been served a lot of dinner rolls. So it's not. There's nothing intrinsic to that. That's external also.
So I distinguish between what the thought about a dinner roll is and what caused it. Okay. It was caused. Granted, it was caused by some person saying to me at some point, "Dinner roll." Right? And me saying dinner roll and trying to say it and eventually learning how to say it. And then
smile when you say that. Dinner roll.
But somehow I learned about what a dinner roll is. The question is it the case that I never got beyond simply knowing how to use the word dinner roll in many different circumstances? So I have inputs and outputs. Or do I actually know what a dinner roll is? Can I think about a dinner roll in itself? Right? What's the essence of a dinner roll? What's the nature of one? And it seems like I go beyond simply, maybe in the beginning I started with just like, this word attaches to that thing, right? But at least as time went on, I came to understand what a dinner roll is. I would claim that seems to be a primitive human experience. But again, there are some philosophers that say, no, all you ever do is inputs and outputs in your own mind. Back there, yes?
I think the best way I've been able to wrap my head around the intrinsic meaning thing is like, even though right now when you talk to one of like the best models out there, when it gets back and like give you the thought of like, okay, like it's really intelligent, but everything it's giving back to you is based on the extrinsic meaning of things that you've given it. And how I can separate myself is the fact that like if you were to tell the model like do this and then like again and again, it's always going to do it. But you can tell a human like you can give a human instruction, but they can actually decide to not do it.
Okay, yeah, so there's two things in there. Oh, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
So there's two things that you had in there. One of them is the meaningfulness of the symbols in the thing, and the other is about freedom.
Yeah.
I want to set aside the freedom because I think that's a distinct question. I think you're right about it, that it's something that we have, and I think it's actually related to intelligence. But I don't want to sort of get off too far on that tangent. Even though it's interesting.
I was able to kind of grasp like intrinsic meaning.
Yeah.
Like the fact that you have a free will.
Well, it is related. You're right about that. There is a connection.
Yeah.
Okay, so over here and then.
Well, you're drawing on the patterns that you experience, but also your experiences with general or whatever memory or. Whereas on the language models, they're using patterns to just produce a pattern. There's no like feeling, emotion, connection to it.
Yeah. So I want to separate out emotion because I don't think that emotion is what makes us intelligent. I agree that computers don't have emotions, but I think that's a separate thing. So one hot take that I would give is that other animals do not have intelligence. But they do have emotion. Other animals, dogs, cats, horses, chimpanzees, have emotions. But I would claim they don't have intelligence. I'm not going to try to defend the intelligence claim now. But I do think those two things are different. I think a computer has neither of them. You're right. But what a large language model is doing is it is rearranging symbols. Right? Symbols that have been given meaning by us. And it's doing it in marvelous ways.
Yeah, it's looking at patterns.
It's doing it in marvelous ways, such that the output of it is incredible. Part of the point of the Chinese room is that you can have the outward behavior without the understanding, without actually having intelligence. The people on the outside of the room, the native Chinese speakers, they do know Chinese. John Searle does not know Chinese. And yet, he's able to behave like someone who knows Chinese because he has this mechanism, this book, to be able to arrange the Chinese symbols in a way that the people outside will understand because of rules. Okay. Yes.
Yes. So all physical systems are subject to gravitational forces.
True.
So would gravitational forces be a beginning of a meaning because it's intrinsically something that is beyond the object itself?
It is something beyond the object itself. So extrinsic meaning is meaning that comes from beyond the object, but it doesn't follow from that everything that comes from beyond the object is extrinsic meaning. So I guess you'd have to give an argument that gravitation somehow is meaningful. I don't know how that would go. But it's not just that anything from beyond the thing is meaning. Anything extrinsically, like extrinsic force. Right? It's like if I lift the laptop, that doesn't give it meaning, right? If I say this laptop represents my struggles through graduate school, then I am imposing a kind of meaning on it, right? But not just any force will do that, it seems. Yeah.
So I'm struggling a little bit here. If I buy this.
If you buy this argument?
Yeah, and I think without even calling them intelligent beings, let's call them intelligent entities.
Who are them?
So there's two entities,
Okay.
each of which we call intelligent because they can manage intrinsic meaning.
Okay.
Seems to me.
Although this doesn't say that something is intelligent just because it has intrinsic meaning.
It's not sufficient.
It just says, that's right, it's necessary but not sufficient. Yeah.
Okay. But this seems to say that two intelligent beings cannot share intrinsic meaning. Because they have to communicate physically through extrinsic meaning, and so you can't guarantee that they.
Well, they can't communicate it to each other.
Right.
And
so.
No, they can't. I don't think.
No,
and
so that means they don't really share it.
Well,
they may have.
They share meaning.
They may have common intrinsic meanings, right? But
yeah.
There's no guarantee that they're sharing the same thing.
So that's just. It's a good point. That just is just to say that I can't peer into your mind and see what your thoughts say. Yeah. And seems that we can't do that. Which is why extrinsic meaning is so important, right? That's why it's so important to have language, because we can communicate what's in our mind. But we can share meaning, but we can't share intrinsic meaning as intrinsic, right? Insofar as it's intrinsic, it's sort of private to me, my thoughts. Like, I can't let you open up mine. Like, if even an alien, imagine, what's one philosopher who gives this example? What if you were thinking about grass, and an alien came to Earth, and he has technology, MRI technology, that massively exceeds what we have, right? And can look at your brain, at what every particle in your brain is doing at every moment. Would he be able to tell that you're thinking about grass? Right? And this philosopher says, well, how could he? The type of information he's gonna have is about motion, right? And forces, or whatever sorts of advanced physics he has, right? More advanced than ours. He's gonna have that information. How is he gonna get the information about grass out of that? Especially if he's never seen grass before. He doesn't know what grass is. So it seems like whatever is intrinsic to our minds isn't, and that's another argument that is not available physically. That all the physical information will not reveal that information. Okay, back here, and then Father Bar. Yeah.
So do you think that anything that has intrinsic meaning would mean the same thing to multiple people? So, like, would it communicate either the same emotions or the same response from the individual?
It's interesting, right? Because I think the only example of something that seems to have intrinsic meaning is human thought. Like I don't have another example to give you. But if there were something that was intrinsically meaningful and visible to a third party, like two people could look at it, then I presume they would both perceive or receive that meaning. I don't know. It's kind of abstract because I don't know what that would be.
Yeah, but then there's like, so I think in English, right? And some person in Germany would think in German.
Yeah.
So if thoughts have intrinsic meaning, I think in English, and I put that thought in that German guy's head, would he be able to know what I think?
So have you learned another language?
I know Spanish.
You know Spanish?
Yeah.
So have you gotten to the point where you can think in Spanish?
Yeah.
Yeah, so me too. And French as well. I've thought in French before too. Now, the funny thing about that though is that when I do that, when I have thoughts or some sort of inner dialogue in another language, I recognize that I'm still thinking about the same thing. Right? There may be another language going through my mind, but I'm still thinking the same thought. Now, of course, in some cases, something can't be translated super well between languages, and this is where languages also influence. They express our concepts, but they also influence our concepts. Like, I love the phrase n'importe quoi in French. That is a delightful phrase that has no translation. You can translate it literally, but has no, the range of situations where it makes sense to use it, it just doesn't, there's nothing in English like it, and I miss it from when I was speaking French. But, so the language also affects our concepts because of the way we use it. In different ways. So that has to be said. But ultimately, we can have the same thought in different languages, I think.
I think
Yeah. So Father Bart, and then yeah.
This was exactly the point that I wanted to make.
Okay.
So you can start with language with Sava, and that's it's input output. I learned Sava, and Sava is used in these many different circumstances. But there does come a point where you think in the other language, and that's getting to the point of thought. But then you start dreaming in the other language as well.
Yeah.
And that's that's something you have no control over. It's not something. It's something that's really invading your thoughts at the level. And so there really is something here. And I know there's the Philip K. Dick's question about androids dreaming. But there's something about the human consciousness here that's immaterial, of course, and that it really does speak to this, that it is something deeper than just symbol, something that there's meaning there. And it does get expressed in language, but yeah, it's a completely unformed thought in my head, but I knew that there had to be something between the difference between when you're first learning a language and the point at which you're thinking and dreaming in that language. So.
Your concepts have been sort of assimilated to that language. Okay, let's, we need to probably finish up, and we can, I'm going to hang around, so happy to continue to talk. You had a question here?
Well, just thinking about examples. Suppose you're not a blind person, so when I'm thinking about grass, but no one, I think a better example maybe, no one can describe color red.
The color red.
When I say red, I see red. You know what red is. I mean,
Yeah.
unless you're blind. But
Yeah.
if you tell a computer, it can describe the wavelength, but it doesn't know what red is.
Right, or even think of an alien instead of a computer. So let's say you have an alien that doesn't have
Yeah.
the power of sight.
Yeah,
He has other senses.
So I
Okay.
think that
So,
if we boil
yeah.
down to the basic, more universal concept, all languages are the same. Well, the universal, like sky, red, blue. Okay.
Because they relate to common experience.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
the common experience of humans.
Well,
And number two is about the Chinese room experiment. The system knows. This is a very simplified example, but I'm trying to be devil's advocate.
Yeah.
There are systems in nature that I know every part, but I'm unable to describe the bulk behavior and vice versa. That is,
Yeah.
I can describe how the system behaves, but I don't know anything inside. So the system will move like it has its mind.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about water, okay? I'm thinking about water. I'm thinking about quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
And then, so I think the objection one is actually more powerful to me.
The system objection.
No. The system objection is not as powerful to me.
Okay.
The illusion
The
objection,
illusion objection.
because you say it's an illusion. But to conclude that it's an illusion, you must have a standard set. This is reality, therefore I know it's illusion. So first you have to define what is real and what is illusion.
Right.
So it's like a circular. It is
Right.
a circular argument. Okay. And
Right. I mean, we're assuming that we have some truth.
we have
But we
something
kinda have to do
grab
that.
onto. Just like free will, because some materials,
Yeah.
materialists would
Yeah.
insist that it's an illusion, just like free will.
Right.
But they are still using the faith, like, I trust that it will emerge. I trust that it's an illusion. And it's just,
Right. I mean, people have arguments for those things. I mean, people who think free will is an illusion have arguments for it. They're not just, it's not just faith.
my final point. Have you seen a movie called Ex Machina?
I have not. I've heard of it, but I have
It's
not.
actually a great movie.
Okay.
And it's the robot, or android, is just a more sophisticated Chinese room.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it would behave.
Yeah.
It behaves just like a human, a beautiful young woman. But then you can also draw, there is a book So like the other extreme is, years ago I read a book called, I think it's called Into the Gray Zone.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the opposite. It's like some patient we think as vegetable. There is something inside. Their brain still functioning, but they have no reaction. So the ex machina, the robot, the actress did a great job. It behaves like a human, but it doesn't have soul.
Yeah.
And the people who are vegetable, but they actually have soul.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. I'll be around, and if you want to stay around and continue the conversation, I'm happy.